He came to buy a gift. Stalone came to change a life. Welcome to Stalone Unleashed. Let us uncover what really happened. The bell above the door of antiquities and adornments chimed a delicate, old-fashioned tune as young Leo Henderson stepped inside, the sound swallowed by the shop's hushed, museum-like atmosphere. He was small for his 10 years, with wide, serious eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of the cluttered wonderland before him. The air smelled of beeswax, old paper, and the faint, metallic tang of tarnished silver. Glass cases gleamed under soft spotlights, showcasing a labyrinth of forgotten treasures. Intricate jewelry, porcelain figurines, tarnished military medals, and time-worn pocket watches that had long ceased to mark the hours. Leo clutched a small, crumpled wad of bills in his hand, his carefully saved allowance, supplemented by earnings from a month of diligently performed neighborhood chores. It wasn't much, but to him, it represented a fortune, a means to an end that filled him with a fierce, tender determination. His mother's birthday was a week away, and he was on a mission to find her the perfect gift, something as special and unique as she was. He navigated the narrow aisles with a quiet reverence, his gaze darting from one fascinating object to another. He bypassed the glittering gemstones and ornate silverware, his attention drawn to the more unassuming items, the ones that seemed to whisper stories of past lives, of love and loss, of quiet endurance. He knew his mother's tastes. She wasn't one for ostentation. She cherished things with history, with soul. Standing near a display of antique brooches, his worn denim jacket a stark contrast to the shop's refined elegance, was another figure, equally out of place, yet in a different way. He was an older man, his presence radiating a quiet, formidable strength. His face, etched with the lines of a life fully lived, was thoughtful, his eyes, the color of a winter sky, observant. He wore a simple, dark work shirt and faded jeans, clothes that spoke of utility rather than fashion. He wasn't browsing. He was simply being. His stillness was a counterpoint to the shop's silent clamor of history. This was Silas, a man who often found himself drawn to such places, repositories of forgotten stories, much like himself. In his pocket, his fingers idly traced the smooth, worn surface of a small, intricately carved wooden compass, a gift from a long-lost mentor, a man who had taught him about true north, not just in navigation, but in life. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. He was simply absorbing the atmosphere, the echoes of the past. His attention, however, was subtly drawn to the small boy who moved with such earnest concentration, his brow furrowed in serious deliberation. There was a vulnerability about the child, yet also a palpable sense of purpose that resonated with Silas. He watched, not intrusively, but with a quiet, empathetic interest, as Leo finally stopped before a small, velvet-lined tray displaying a collection of antique lockets. The boy's eyes lit up. He leaned closer, his nose almost touching the glass, his gaze fixed on one particular piece. A small, silver locket, heart-shaped, its surface unadorned but for a delicate, almost invisible floral engraving around its edge. It was simple, elegant, and undeniably old. Leo's hand, still clutching the crumpled bills, tightened. This was it. This was the one. He looked around for assistance, his eyes landing on the shop owner, Mr. Abernathy, a portly man with a monocle and an air of perpetual, slightly disdainful amusement. Mr. Abernathy was currently engaged in a hushed, obsequious conversation with a woman dripping in diamonds and furs, clearly a more valued customer. Leo waited patiently, his gaze returning to the locket, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Silas observed the silent drama, the boy's earnest desire, the shopkeeper's pointed indifference. It was a familiar scene, a small, everyday injustice that spoke of larger, more insidious hierarchies of perceived worth. The little wooden compass in his pocket seemed to grow warmer, a silent reminder of true direction, of the importance of valuing the small, the overlooked, the genuine. Leo's patience, though considerable for a 10-year-old on a mission, began to fray as Mr. Abernathy continued his fawning attention to the bejeweled woman. The boy shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his gaze darting between the locket and the oblivious shopkeeper. He knew he didn't have much time. He had promised to be home soon. Finally, summoning his courage, Leo took a tentative step towards the counter. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice small but clear in the hushed shop. Mr. Abernathy, interrupted mid-syllable, turned, his monocle glinting, his expression one of barely concealed annoyance. "Yes?" he inquired, his tone conveying that whatever the boy wanted, it was undoubtedly an inconvenience. The bejeweled woman looked down her nose at Leo, a silent, disdainful dismissal. Leo, though intimidated, stood his ground. "That locket, sir," he said, pointing towards the display case. "The silver heart-shaped one. How much is it?" Mr. Abernathy's gaze followed Leo's pointing finger, then flickered dismissively back to the boy. "That, my dear child," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "is a genuine Victorian piece. Exquisite craftsmanship. Quite valuable." He didn't name a price, the implication clear. It was far beyond the means of a small boy clutching a handful of crumpled bills. Leo's face fell, but he persisted. Could you just tell me the price, please?" he asked, his voice faltering slightly. Mr. Abernathy sighed, a theatrical sound of long-suffering patience. He adjusted his monocle and peered at a tiny price tag, almost invisible beneath the locket. $75, he announced, his tone conveying that this was an absurd sum for such a child to even contemplate. Leo's heart sank. $75. He unfurled his crumpled bills, counting them quickly, his lips moving silently. $37.50. Exactly half. His allowance, his chore money, every penny he had saved. He looked up at Mr. Abernathy, his eyes pleading. I have $37.50, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Could I maybe pay the rest later? I could do more chores. I can save up. It's for my mom. It's her birthday." Mr. Abernathy chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. The bejeweled woman smirked. "My dear boy," Abernathy said, his voice laced with a cruel amusement, "this is a place of business, not a charity. We don't do layaway for children with pocket money. Perhaps you should look for a trinket more suited to your budget." He gestured vaguely toward a dusty shelf filled with cheap, mass-produced souvenirs. Leo's face flushed a deep crimson. His eyes welled with tears, but he blinked them back fiercely. He clutched his money tightly, his small shoulders slumping in defeat. The beautiful silver locket, so close, yet so impossibly far away. He mumbled a quiet, "Thank you, sir," and turned to leave, his dream shattered. Silas, who had observed the entire exchange from his quiet corner, felt a familiar surge of cold anger. The shopkeeper's casual cruelty, his dismissive arrogance, the way he had so callously crushed the boy's earnest hope. It was an old story, one Silas had witnessed too many times in a world that often valued profit over people, appearances over heart. The wooden compass in his pocket felt like a lodestone, pulling him forward. He couldn't let this stand. He couldn't let this small boy walk away with his spirit so bruised, his belief in the possibility of goodness so damaged. He waited until Leo had almost reached the door. Then he moved, his steps quiet but purposeful. "Mr. Abernathy," Silas said, his voice calm, but carrying an undeniable weight that made the shopkeeper turn, his monocle nearly dislodging in surprise. The bejeweled woman looked annoyed at this further interruption. Silas ignored her. "The boy," Silas continued, his gaze steady, "he has $37.50. I believe that's a fair price for the locket he desires." The intervention hung in the air, unexpected, and, to Mr. Abernathy, utterly unwelcome. Mr. Abernathy stared at Silas, his mouth slightly agape, his usual air of haughty composure momentarily deserting him. He clearly hadn't anticipated this quiet, unassuming man interfering in his carefully managed domain. "I beg your pardon?" Abernathy stammered, recovering some of his bluster. "The price of the locket is $75. It is clearly marked. I cannot simply give it away." "He's not asking you to give it away, Mr. Abernathy," Silas replied, his voice still calm, his gaze unwavering. "He is offering what he has earned through his own effort. And sometimes the true value of a thing is not what's written on a price tag, but what it represents to the heart." Leo, who had stopped at the door, turned back, his eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and dawning hope. He looked from Silas to Mr. Abernathy, then back to Silas, a silent plea in his gaze. The bejeweled woman sniffed disdainfully. "Really?" she muttered, loud enough for Silas to hear. "Some people have no understanding of commerce." Silas ignored her pointed remark, his attention focused solely on Abernathy. "This boy wishes to buy a gift for his mother," Silas continued. "A gift chosen with care, with love. Is that not a transaction of considerable worth, Mr. Abernathy? Perhaps even more valuable than the $75 you are so keen to extract?" Abernathy flushed, his jowls quivering slightly. "This is a business, sir, not a sentimentality shop. I have overheads, expenses. I cannot simply indulge every child with a whim." "It's not a whim, Mr. Abernathy," Silas said, his voice taking on a sharper edge, though still quiet. "It's a heartfelt desire to show love and appreciation, something perhaps you've forgotten the value of amidst your calculations of profit and loss." He took a step closer to the counter, his presence, though unassuming, suddenly filling the space. "Consider the boy's $37.50, Silas said, his voice dropping, becoming more intense. "And consider this. I will purchase that rather garish diamond bracelet your other customer is admiring." He nodded towards the bejeweled woman, who looked momentarily stunned, then preened slightly at the unexpected attention to her chosen item. "I will pay your full asking price for it, Mr. Abernathy. Provided," Silas added, his gaze returning to the shopkeeper, hard and unyielding, "provided you sell the locket to the boy for the money he has in his hand, and that you treat him with the respect any customer, regardless of their age or their means, deserves." The proposition hung in the air, a bold, unexpected maneuver. Mr. Abernathy's eyes widened, his mind clearly racing, calculating. The diamond bracelet was one of his most expensive pieces, one he had been trying to sell for months. The profit from that sale would far outweigh any perceived loss on the locket. Leo stared at Silas, his mouth open in astonishment. He didn't know who this man was, this quiet stranger who had suddenly appeared like a figure from a storybook, a champion of the small and the hopeful. The bejeweled woman, initially flattered, now looked slightly put out, as if her transaction was being used as a bargaining chip. But the allure of the bracelet, and perhaps a dawning, grudging respect for Silas's bold play, kept her silent. Mr. Abernathy swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He looked from Silas to the diamond bracelet, then to the small silver locket, then to the hopeful, anxious face of the young boy. The silence in the shop was thick with unspoken calculations, with the weighing of greed against a sudden, unwelcome intrusion of conscience. The little wooden compass in Silas's pocket felt warm, its needle pointing steadfastly towards a moral true north. He had laid down his terms. Now, it was up to Mr. Abernathy to choose his own direction. Mr. Abernathy's mind, a well-oiled machine of commerce, quickly processed the equation. The substantial profit from the diamond bracelet, a piece that had been languishing in his inventory, versus the negligible loss on the Victorian locket. Pride warred with pragmatism. His instinct was to refuse, to assert his authority, to put this interfering stranger in his place. But the unwavering intensity of Silas's gaze, the quiet, unshakable conviction in his voice, gave Abernathy pause. There is something about this man, something that suggested he was not to be trifled with, not easily dismissed. And then there was the undeniable allure of the bracelet sale. He glanced at the bejeweled woman, who was now watching him with a mixture of impatience and anticipation. He looked at Leo, whose small face was a mask of desperate hope. Finally, his gaze returned to Silas. He saw no triumph in the older man's eyes, no hint of mockery, only a calm, steady expectation. Abernathy cleared his throat, a small, sputtering sound. "Well," he began, trying to regain some semblance of his usual haughty demeanor. "Since you put it that way, sir, and since it is for the young man's mother, I suppose an exception can be made. Just this once, mind you." He forced a tight, unconvincing smile. "The locket for the boy. $37.50. Leo gasped, his eyes shining with pure, unadulterated joy. He looked at Silas, a silent, heartfelt thank you in his gaze, then rushed back to the counter, carefully placing his crumpled bills on the polished wood. "Thank you, sir." "Oh, thank you," he exclaimed, his voice filled with a happiness that seemed to illuminate the dusty old shop. Mr. Abernathy, still slightly flustered, took the money and, with a sigh that was part resignation, part grudging admiration for Silas's maneuver, retrieved the small silver locket from the display case. He placed it in a tiny velvet box and handed it to Leo. "There you are, young man," he said, his tone noticeably less condescending than before. "I trust your mother will appreciate it." "Oh, she will, sir. She really will." Leo beamed, clutching the small box to his chest as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Silas watched, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his own lips. He then turned his attention to the bejeweled woman. "And now, madam," he said, his voice returning to its quiet, courteous tone, "if you are still interested in the diamond bracelet?" The woman, though still somewhat miffed at being a pawn in this little drama, was not about to pass up the opportunity. "Yes, of course," she said with a brittle smile. "It is rather striking." Silas nodded to Mr. Abernathy. "We'll take it." As Mr. Abernathy busied himself with a more lucrative transaction, carefully wrapping the diamond bracelet in layers of tissue paper and placing it in an opulent gift box, Leo approached Silas, his eyes still shining. "Mister," he said, his voice filled with awe, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my mom's birthday." Silas looked down at the boy, his gaze gentle. "It was your love for your mother that saved her birthday, Leo," he said quietly. "You chose a gift from the heart. That's what truly matters." He reached into his pocket, and his fingers closed around the small wooden compass. "Always remember to follow your heart, young man," he added. "It's the truest guide you'll ever have." Leo nodded solemnly, as if absorbing a profound piece of wisdom. He clutched the small velvet box containing the locket even tighter. The bell above the shop door chimed as the bejeweled woman, now the proud owner of a very expensive bracelet, swept out, casting a final, curious glance at Silas and Leo. Mr. Abernathy, his profits secured, seemed almost amiable. He even offered Leo a small, complimentary polishing cloth for the locket. The atmosphere in antiquities and adornments had subtly shifted. The transaction had been more than just a commercial one. It had been a small, quiet lesson in values, a reminder that true worth is not always measured in dollars and cents. Leo, still beaming, clutched the small velvet box as if it were the crown jewels. He looked up at Silas, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and childlike curiosity. "Mister," he asked, Are you like a secret helper? Like in the stories?" Silas allowed himself a rare, genuine smile. "Something like that, perhaps," he replied. "Sometimes we all need a little help navigating the currents, finding our way." He gently touched the wooden compass in his pocket. "This was given to me by someone who helped me find my way a long time ago. It reminds me to always try to point towards what's right, what's true." Leo's eyes widened slightly, as if Silas had just shared a profound secret. "Wow," he breathed. Mr. Abernathy, having completed the sale of the diamond bracelet, approached them, his demeanor noticeably more deferential than before. The substantial profit had clearly softened his earlier hauteur. "Sir," he said to Silas, "thank you for your most generous patronage. And young man," he added, turning to Leo, "I do hope your mother enjoys her gift. It is indeed a rather special piece." His tone, though still a little pompous, lacked its earlier condescension. It seemed even Mr. Abernathy had absorbed a small part of the day's lesson. "She will, sir," Leo said confidently. "It's perfect." He looked at Silas again. "I have to go now. Mom will be wondering where I am." "Of course," Silas said. "You run along. And happy birthday to your mother, when it comes. Thank you, mister, Leo exclaimed. He gave Silas one last, shining look of gratitude, then turned and practically skipped out of the shop, the bell above the door chiming a cheerful farewell. Silas watched him go, a warmth spreading through his chest. It was a small thing, this intervention, a minor adjustment in the grand scheme of things. But for that one boy, for that one heartfelt gift, it had meant the world. And perhaps, just perhaps, it had planted a small seed of change in the heart of a cynical shopkeeper as well. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, interrupting Silas's thoughts. A rather unusual afternoon, wouldn't you say, sir? He remarked, a hint of grudging respect in his voice. Silas nodded. Life often presents us with unusual afternoons, Mr. Abernathy. It's how we navigate them that defines us. He picked up the opulent box containing the diamond bracelet. He had no personal use for such an extravagant item. His reasons for purchasing it had been entirely strategic, a means to an end. But now, holding it, he considered its fate. Tell me, Mr. Abernathy, Silas said, do you ever contribute to local charities? Perhaps a women's shelter or a children's hospital? Abernathy looked surprised. Well, yes, from time to time. For tax purposes, you understand. Silas smiled faintly. Of course. Well, perhaps this bracelet could find its way to such an organization. Auction, perhaps, to benefit those who might appreciate its sparkle in a different way. He placed the box back on the counter. Consider a donation on behalf of young Leo and his mother. And perhaps, he added, his gaze meeting Abernathy's directly, as a reminder of the true value of things. With that, Silas turned and walked towards the door, leaving a stunned and contemplative Mr. Abernathy standing behind his counter, the glittering diamond bracelet a silent testament to a most unusual transaction. The little wooden compass in Silas's pocket felt light, its purpose for the day fulfilled. It had pointed towards kindness, towards justice, towards the simple, profound truth of a child's love for his mother. As Silas stepped out of antiquities and adornments and back into the bustling afternoon street, he felt a quiet sense of completion. The air seemed fresher, the city sounds less harsh. He had not set out to change the world, only to right a small, specific wrong, to ensure a child's heartfelt gesture was not crushed by cynicism or greed. The interaction with Mr. Abernathy, the purchase of the bracelet, the ensuring of Leo's precious locket, it had been an improvisation, a response to a moment of injustice. But it had also been guided by a lifetime of adhering to certain principles, the principles his old mentor, the giver of the wooden compass, had instilled in him. Principles of fairness, of empathy, of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. He thought of young Leo, hurrying home with his treasure, his heart full of love and excitement for his mother. That small silver locket, once just another antique in a dusty shop, had been transformed. It was now a symbol of a child's devotion, of a stranger's unexpected kindness, of a moment when compassion had triumphed over commerce. And the diamond bracelet, left behind on Mr. Abernathy's counter, destined now for a charity auction, that too had been transformed. From a mere object of luxury, a symbol of wealth, it had become a potential source of help for those in need, its glitter now imbued with a different, more meaningful kind of sparkle. Silas knew Mr. Abernathy might not be entirely reformed. Greed and cynicism were deeply ingrained habits. But perhaps, just perhaps, the events of the afternoon had planted a seed, a sliver of doubt in his materialistic worldview, a faint memory of a moment when human connection had outweighed profit. Silas walked on, blending back into the anonymity of the city crowd. He sought no thanks, no recognition. His reward was in the quiet satisfaction of having acted in accordance with his own moral compass, of having helped to steer a small corner of the world, however briefly, towards a slightly truer north. He passed a park where children were playing, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. He saw a young mother watching them, her face alight with a tender, protective love. It reminded him of Leo, of the fierce, pure love that had driven the boy on his quest for the perfect gift. These small, everyday moments of connection, Silas mused, were the true treasures, more valuable than any antique, more precious than any gemstone. They were the things that gave life its deepest meaning, its most enduring worth. The wooden compass in his pocket felt like a quiet affirmation. It had guided him well today, and he knew, as he continued on his solitary journey, that would continue to guide him, always pointing towards the simple, profound truths of the human heart. The world was full of Mr. Abernethys, of casual cruelties and unthinking dismissals. But it was also full of Laos, of earnest hopes and heartfelt gestures. And as long as there were those who were willing to stand up for the latter, to champion the small and the vulnerable, then there was always reason for hope, always a chance for kindness to prevail. The memory of Leo's shining eyes, his triumphant grip on the small velvet box, stayed with Silas long after he had left the antique shop. It was a reminder of the profound impact that small acts of intervention could have, not just on the recipient, but on the witness, and perhaps even on the perpetrator of an unkindness. He wondered about Mr. Abernathy. Would the shopkeeper truly donate the bracelet as suggested? Or would his ingrained commercial instincts reassert themselves once Silas was gone? Silas couldn't know for sure, but he had planted the idea, offered a different path, a way for Abernathy to transform an act of calculated generosity into something genuinely altruistic. The choice, ultimately, would be Abernathy's. Silas believed in giving people the opportunity to rise to their better selves, even if they often disappointed. His own life had been a testament to the power of second chances, of unexpected kindness from unlikely sources. His mentor, the old craftsman who had given him the wooden compass, had seen something in a lost, adrift young Silas that no one else had. He had offered guidance, not judgment, taught him a skill, not just a trade, and instilled in him a moral framework that had become the bedrock of his existence. That compass, Silas often thought, did more than point north. It pointed towards integrity, towards empathy, towards the quiet courage to do the right thing, even when it was difficult or unpopular. He continued his walk, the rhythm of his steps a familiar comfort. He passed other shops, their windows filled with goods designed to tempt, to impress. He saw other shoppers, their faces intent, focused on their own desires, their own errands. The world bustled on, largely oblivious to the small dramas, the quiet acts of kindness or cruelty that unfolded in its midst every day. But Silas saw them. He had always been an observer, a student of human nature in all its complexity. He had seen a boy's pure love, a shopkeeper's casual disdain, a stranger's unexpected intervention, and the subtle, almost imperceptible shift that can occur when one human being truly sees another, not as a means to an end, or an obstacle, or an irrelevance, but as a fellow traveler, deserving of respect and compassion. He hoped Leo's mother would love the locket. He had no doubt she would. A gift chosen with such care, purchased with such sacrifice and determination, carried a value far beyond its material worth. It was a vessel of love, a tangible symbol of a child's devotion. And perhaps, when Leo told her the story of how he came to acquire it, a story that would undoubtedly feature a mysterious, kind stranger, it would become an even more cherished heirloom, a reminder not just of her son's love, but of the unexpected moments of grace that can illuminate even the most ordinary of days. Silas reached his own quiet street, the familiar sight of his small, unassuming house a welcome beacon. He was a solitary man, but not a lonely one. His life was filled with the quiet company of his memories, his principles, and the enduring lessons of those, like his mentor, who had shaped him. And sometimes, on days like today, it was also touched by the fleeting, but no less meaningful, connections he made with strangers, fellow souls navigating the often unpredictable currents of life. Inside his small workshop at the back of the house, the scent of wood shavings and old tools a familiar comfort, Silas took the small wooden compass from his pocket. He placed it on his workbench, its brass casing gleaming faintly in the dim light. He then took out the small, carved wooden dog that Arthur, the homeless veteran from another recent encounter, had given him. He set it beside the compass. Two simple, handcrafted objects, each a testament to a human connection, a story of resilience, a quiet act of kindness. He thought of Leo and the silver locket. He imagined the boy presenting it to his mother, the joy in her eyes, the warmth of her embrace. These were the things that mattered, the true north of human experience. He picked up a piece of scrap wood, a smooth, pale piece of birch, and his carving knife. His hands, gnarled and calloused from years of work, moved with a practiced, almost unconscious skill. He wasn't sure what he would carve. Perhaps another knotwinger bird, a symbol of resilience. Or perhaps something new, something inspired by the day's events, by the image of a small boy's determined love. The act of carving was a form of meditation for him, a way of processing the world, of giving tangible form to the emotions and ideas that stirred within him. As he worked, the blade shaping the wood, he reflected on the interconnectedness of things. His intervention in the antique shop had been a small act, almost insignificant in the grand sweep of the world. Yet, for Leo, for his mother, perhaps even for Mr. Abernathy, it had been a moment of consequence, a pivot point. And those small moments, Silas believed, were what life was truly made of. They were the threads that wove the tapestry of human experience, the quiet acts of courage and compassion that, multiplied, could indeed change the world, one heart, one gesture at a time. He didn't know if he would ever see Leo again. Their paths had crossed briefly, then diverged. But he would carry the memory of the boy's shining eyes, of his fierce love for his mother, as a reminder of the enduring power of simple, heartfelt goodness. The wooden compass on his workbench seemed to offer a silent affirmation. It had guided him true today, and as long as he followed its unwavering needle, he knew he would continue to find his way, navigating the complexities of the world with integrity, with empathy, and with a quiet, steadfast commitment to doing what was right. The blade moved smoothly, surely, and slowly under Silas's patient hand. A new form began to emerge from the wood, a testament to another story, another quiet act of bearing witness. The following week, Silas found himself walking past antiquities and adornments once more. He hadn't planned it, but his route often took him through that part of the city. He paused, a flicker of curiosity prompting him to glance through the window. The shop looked much the same, its interior dimly lit, its shelves and cases filled with the silent stories of forgotten objects. Mr. Abernathy was visible behind the counter, engaged in conversation with a customer, his monocle firmly in place. As Silas watched, he saw something that made him stop. Tucked away in a corner of the main display window, nestled amongst some rather ostentatious Victorian silver, was a small, handwritten card. It was discreet, almost hidden, but Silas's keen eyes picked it out. He moved closer to the window, trying to decipher the elegant script. A portion of this week's proceeds, the card read, will be donated to the City Children's Fund in honor of a young man's love for his mother. Silas stared at the card for a long moment, a slow, surprised smile spreading across his face. Mr. Abernathy, it seemed, had indeed been touched by the events of that afternoon, perhaps more deeply than Silas had dared to hope. The diamond bracelet, or at least its value, was being put to good use. It was a small gesture, perhaps, driven by a complex mixture of motives, guilt, a dawning conscience, maybe even a shrewd business sense, recognizing the appeal of a heartwarming story. But whatever the reason, it was a step in the right direction, a flicker of light in a place that had previously seemed rather dim. Silas didn't go into the shop. He didn't need to. The small card in the window was message enough. He continued on his way, the wooden compass in his pocket feeling a little warmer, a little lighter. It seemed that even the most cynical of hearts could sometimes be nudged, however slightly, toward a truer north. He thought of Leo and the locket. He imagined the boy's mother wearing it, a constant, tangible reminder of her son's love, and perhaps of the unexpected kindness of strangers. These connections, these small acts of grace, were what wove the true fabric of community, a fabric far more precious, far more enduring than any antique or adornment. As he walked, the city sounds seemed a little less harsh, the faces of the passers-by a little less anonymous. He felt a renewed sense of hope, a quiet affirmation that even in a world often driven by self-interest and indifference, there is always room for compassion, always a chance for the human spirit to shine through. And Silas Thorne, the quiet observer, the steadfast guardian of unspoken truths, would continue to look for those moments, to nurture them, to ensure that the delicate chimes of kindness were not entirely drowned out by the louder, more discordant noises of the world. His own small compass, and the memory of a boy's determined love, would continue to guide his way. The change in Mr. Abernathy, however subtle, lingered in Silas's thoughts. It wasn't a dramatic conversion, but a small, almost imperceptible shift, like a compass needle quivering before settling on a new bearing. Silas knew that one act of coerced generosity didn't necessarily signify a profound transformation of character. Yet, the handwritten card in the window, the quiet acknowledgement of Leo's gesture, suggested that something had indeed resonated with the cynical shopkeeper. Perhaps it was the undeniable purity of the boy's love for his mother, or the quiet, unyielding pressure of Silas's moral conviction. Or perhaps it was simply the unexpectedness of the encounter, a disruption to Abernathy's carefully ordered, profit-driven world that had forced him to confront values he had long dismissed or ignored. Silas often found that true change rarely happened in grand, sweeping pronouncements. It was more often a gradual process, a series of small awakenings of quiet recognitions. His own life had been shaped by such moments, by the patient guidance of his mentor, by the silent lessons of nature, by the enduring power of memory and conscience. He passed by the park where he had seen Leo earlier, his face alight with joy as he clutched the locket. The image brought a renewed warmth to Silas's heart. He hoped that Leo would always retain that capacity for fierce, selfless love, that the world would not tarnish his innocent belief in the power of a heartfelt gift. He hoped, too, that Leo's mother would understand the true depth of her son's devotion, a devotion that had led him to save every penny, to face down his own shyness, to endure the condescension of a dismissive shopkeeper, all for the sake of finding her the perfect expression of his love. That silver locket, Silas mused, was more than just a piece of antique jewelry. It was a vessel, carrying within its delicate, heart-shaped form the immeasurable weight of a child's pure affection. It was a story of perseverance, of hope, and of the quiet, unexpected ways in which human hearts can connect, even across the divides of age, circumstance, and cynicism. Silas continued his walk, the rhythm of his steps a steady counterpoint to the bustling energy of the city. He was a solitary figure, but his solitude was not one of loneliness. It was a chosen state, a space for observation, for reflection, for the quiet work of aligning his own inner compass with the enduring principles that guided his life. He knew there would be other Abernathy's, other moments of casual cruelty or indifference that would demand response. He knew there would be other Leos, other small, hopeful souls in need of a quiet champion. And he would be ready, as he always was, to offer his steady presence, his unwavering conviction, his belief in the fundamental goodness that, however deeply buried, resided in every human heart. The little wooden compass in his pocket, a gift from a wise old man who had understood the true navigation of life, was a constant reminder of this purpose. It pointed not just to a geographical direction, but to a moral one, a path of integrity, empathy, and the quiet courage to make a difference, one small, heartfelt gesture at a time.